Welcome to a new daily top AskReddit video. Today's topic:
Happily married couples of Reddit. What are some serious issues that have plagued your otherwise great relationship? No longer a pain point, but is a good reminder. Just talk, don't internalize your stresses, fears, etc. All that happens when you hold things in is that vacuum is filled with assumptions that benefit neither you or your spouse. I suffered a panic attack 2 weeks ago because I was keeping everything inside me. Once I told my wife everything I had in my head, suddenly it felt really silly that I was keeping it inside. Should have talked more from the beginning. Lovely bloke. Married for 28 years. Only man for me. But he talks me through his golf games and he plays 3 times a week. I smile and nod. I figure if that's our only issue, I'm a lucky woman. My wife does this sort of thing. It's at its worst when someone else has cornered her and put her through a long, boring, almost unbearable conversation, and then she tells me the story about it, including the long, boring, almost unbearable conversation as part of the story in its entirety. Man facepalming, light skin tone. This made me laugh. Thank you for your service. And also, sorry. Not enough time for ourselves. We both have big families and friend circles. If we are not seeing my friends, we are seeing her friends. If we are not seeing her family, we are seeing my family. This is on top of working long hours and being fairly introverted to boot. We have to schedule dates and alone time, so we can recover. Honestly, I couldn't imagine managing all this with anyone else, and I am so thankful for her. This is definitely the one. After having kids and having little to no village to help us, we get little or no time to ourselves. This is in the top 3 reasons myself and my spouse have serious reservations with having kids. We both turn 30 within the next year. We don't have a proper support network, we are the support network. We're exhausted and drained enough. I don't know if it's fair to anyone to bring a kid into all of this. Different sex drives. How did you overcome this, and any advice to keeping the hope alive? Been together 9 years and I'm scared about this being the rest of my life. I just started therapy with my gal and then signed up for individual stuff as well. I feel really gaslit by the process, honestly. I'm getting told I may be a sex addict, that I don't value myself, and a good assortment of other things. I'm supposed to be some fucking monk or something. No one cares how the constant rejection makes me feel, you know. It's my fault that it hurts my feelings and I should just go jerk off more. At one point we went like 8 months without being intimate. This is something that I've dealt with in my marriage for years, and while it took a long time for my wife and I to get into a better space with each other, for about the last year or so, it's gone really well in terms of how well we get along, how much less of a conflict our sex life represents in our relationship, and frankly, how good our sex life is now as a result. I do want to stress, it's not because we arrived at a frequency of sex that is ideal for either of us. Our middle ground is twice a week, which is less than I would ideally like and more than my wife would, naturally, want, but importantly, we can both accept this compromise without feeling either starved or overwhelmed. When we're intimate, it's because both of us are choosing to show up for one another. Also, the sex we have is filled with pleasure and connection, and both of us agree that in the 20+ years that we have been together, this is the best sex has ever been between the two of us. It's not because we're doing anything different physically, but because the level of honesty and trust in mutual appreciation between us makes everything feel better. Both of us feel sexier around each other because we feel more emotionally connected. That's why I try to make it clear that evaluating a sex life on the basis of quantity rather than quality is likely to create unnecessary conflict and disappointment, but there's absolutely a point at which quantity matters too. In our case, working with an EFT couples counselor was a game changer and helping us communicate better, be more empathetic to the other person, all of which paved the road to this better place. It's too bad that you feel like the couples counseling process isn't helping the two of you, and it may be worth looking for an alternative option. The reality is that the moment one of you feels like the therapist you're working with is taking sides, they've become a lot less effective in a couples context. I should point out though, in the case of OP, it's not like any of us are in a position to know what the full story is. Anyways, in a situation like this, start with these questions. How important is sex to each of you? Some people are totally happy being in a low-sex relationship because they're still fulfilled despite the low amount of sex. Other people can't find fulfillment in a relationship if sex is relatively low, absent. Where do you fall? Where does your partner? What forms of intimacy make each of you feel fulfilled? Is there a middle ground where they overlap? People aren't necessarily low, high libido for everything. It's more like a menu. There are certain things low libido folks might be more open to, more frequently, that stop short of conventional PIV, for example. Likewise, a high libido person may be open to a variety of ways that scratch the particular itch. This question requires both people to be flexible and avoid all or nothing mindsets. It's a reminder that it's better to treat sex as a wheel, not a staircase. What would help each of you be more sexually open, available to the other? In other words, what barriers, brakes, to sex can be removed? What turn-ons, accelerators, to sex can be introduced? Along those lines, how much work are either of you willing to put in to meet the other people's needs, comfort? Work can mean being consciously mindful of creating time, space for intimacy. If one or both of your sex drives is being impacted by physical, medical issues, are either of you willing to look into interventions for those? That can be starting medication or changing it or looking into treatments depending on what impacting people's sex drive. I do want to warn people, no one likes feeling broken, and very few people are going to feel encouraged to fix their sex drive if their partner is making them feel like something is wrong with them. Would couples counseling help? I say this from personal experience that couples who have been dealing with sexual mismatches for a while can get locked into negative patterns where they end up in the same arguments over and over again, creating frustration and resentment but never having real resolution. If you feel like you've had the same conversation with your partner hundreds of times, and the two of you seem stuck, you're probably dealing with a negative pattern. This is where therapy can help, by teaching couples how to break out of the dysfunctional cycles. In this regard, I highly recommend people look into emotionally focused therapy in particular. There's a bunch of books that can help people understand what's going on with their own sex drive and that of their partners, and most importantly, how to bridge the gap. Here's a few I'd recommend. Lauren Mersey and Jennifer Vensel's Desire, an inclusive guide to navigating libido differences in relationships. This came out recently and it's very much written for couples dealing with mismatched sex drives, both short and long term. It helps to explain how sexual desire works for different people and what couples can do to try to find middle ground. Emily Nagoski's Come Together, The Science and Art of Creating Lasting Sexual Connections. This is Nagoski's new book, January 2024, about sustaining a good sexual connection with partners over the long term. Nagoski's previous book, Come As You Are, helped introduce many people to the concept of responsive desire, and that can be very useful for couples to understand in navigating their sex life. Sounds like you need better therapists, M8. Kids put an incredible amount of stress on a relationship. Almost all of our major arguments have been about our kids. It surprised us because we talked a lot before having kids and we agreed on the big issues. But the devil is in the details. We were raised quite differently, and what I saw as normal, he saw as too permissive and coddling. He saw himself as strict, but what I saw was anger, ultimatums he couldn't keep, and criticism. Kids are grown up now and doing well. We love our kids and are glad we had them, but the empty nest is better for our marriage. Parenting styles, I feel like, is something that is never discussed. It's always, do you want kids? It's never, how do you plan on handling XYZ when it comes to kids? I'm currently trying to navigate this with my husband. I have to constantly be the bad cop because he will cave to the meltdown, which requires me to do double duty trying to undo any enabling. It's exhausting at times. The hardest things have ever been for us was when we let others dictate our relationship. My mom was always an enemy of our relationship, and her sister was always against us. As soon as we stopped letting them have opinions on us, our lives became infinitely better. Misery loves company becomes so blatantly true when you are in a loving relationship. This is why it's so important to have the ability to evaluate criticism for validity instead of blindly accepting it. The most miserable people I've met are always the most insistent that everyone else's marriage secretly or inevitably sucks. My wife's aunt keeps telling her that her happiness in our marriage will disappear by next year. We've been together almost 10 years at this point and we're still increasingly happy together with each passing year. My wife passed away too soon. I'm still in love with her. Same Earl, last year after 35 years together. Thought we had at least another 20 years. Never knew this kind of loneliness. You have balls for going through this. From one internet stranger to another, I wish you all the best. That really sucks. I'm so sorry for your loss. Sitting with you here, if that's okay. Money, 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 Maneri. And also money. Forgot to mention money. Neither of us have many friends, so we rely on each other to meet too many of our needs. Both introverts. Yup, thankfully we share a lot of interests, so it's not too bad. Oldest stepkid, 20 meters, is rapid cycle bipolar, epileptic, bulimic, and on the spectrum. We are on the same page in dealing with things the best we can, but his condition disrupts every aspect of our life. Met my husband when my kid was 5. Didn't know anything was going on at the time, but she developed neurological, mental health issues that disrupted every day for the entire family for about 6 years. Finally under control, but took lots of patience and guidance from therapists. My husband has been so supportive. A good partner and step-parent can make such a difference. I am an oversharer, she is an undersharer. Multiple times in our relationship she had hid things from me because she didn't want me to be disappointed in her lost wedding ring, multiple car accidents, small but still required paperwork. We have been together almost 20 years. She has learned that if I'm not oversharing I am not in a good way. To this day I still need to probe her when I think something is wrong. Together we communicate very well except for the few extremes noted above. We are both planners, so constantly taking about what we have going on is a good way to keep communication open. Also kids. Lol, this is so my husband and I too. He often says if something feels 1% off in any area of life, he will come to me to discuss. But for me, I can walk around carrying heavy burdens, and he is none the wiser because I am just not one to share my problems lol. I prefer them tucked away in a dark corner of my mind, tears of joy, there is hella probing for me to open up.